Have you ever felt like the world is against you? Like no matter what you do, things just don't seem to go your way? Maybe you've thought to yourself, why does this always happen to me? Or why do other people have it easier? If you have, you're not alone. We all experience moments of frustration, moments where life feels unfair, moments where the obstacles seem insurmountable. But there is a difference, an invisible line between acknowledging hardship and becoming trapped in it. The victim mindset is not just about feeling like life is hard. It is about adopting an identity that convinces you that you are powerless, that the world is in control of your fate, that you are merely a passenger in your own life with no real ability to steer. And the scariest part, most people who are trapped in this mindset don't even realize it. The victim mindset is seductive. It offers an explanation for suffering, but it provides a reason for our failures, our disappointments, our struggles. And in a strange way, it feels comfortable. Because if the world is to blame, if life is unfair, if the system is rigged against us, then we don't have to take responsibility. We don't have to change. We don't have to step into the terrifying unknown of personal accountability. But here's the truth. The victim mindset is not just a way of thinking, it is a prison. A prison built from self-imposed limitations, from repeated narratives of helplessness, and from the constant reinforcement of the belief that we are at the mercy of forces beyond our control. And like any prison, the longer we stay in it, the harder it becomes to escape.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
But how do you know if you're trapped? That's the real question. Because the victim mindset does not announce itself. It does not walk into your life and declare, "You are now under my control." No, it creeps in quietly. It disguises itself as justification, as rationalization, as an innocent way of making sense of struggle. You tell yourself, "It's not my fault." And while that may be true in some cases, the victim mindset convinces you that it is never your fault. That life is always happening to you, never because of you. It turns setbacks into proof that you are cursed. It turns challenges into evidence that the universe is unfair. And worst of all, it blinds you to the power you actually have. So let's break it down. Let's expose the 5 silent signs that you might be trapped in the victim mindset. And as we go through them, I want you to ask yourself, not defensively, not with resistance, but with absolute honesty, do I see any of these patterns in my own life? Because awareness is the first step to freedom. The first sign is constant blame. If you find yourself always pointing the finger at someone or something else, your boss, the government, your parents, society, and bad luck, you might be operating from a victim mindset. Now, let's be real. Sometimes external circumstances really are unfair. Sometimes people do wrong us. Sometimes life is cruel. But the difference between someone who is trapped in the victim mindset and someone who isn't is how they respond. A person who refuses to be a victim acknowledges the injustice but refuses to let it define their future. They ask, "What can I do next?" rather than who is to blame. Because blame is easy. Blame gives you a target for your frustration. But blame also keeps you stuck. The more you focus on what others did to you, the less energy you have to change your own reality. The second sign is expecting the worst. When you are in the victim mindset, you do not just experience hardship, you anticipate it. And you assume that things will go wrong before they even happen. You convince yourself that opportunities will slip away, that people will betray you, that failure is inevitable. And here's the dangerous thing about this mindset: it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you expect failure, you subconsciously behave in ways that lead to failure. When you assume people will hurt you, you act defensively, pushing them away before they even get a chance to prove otherwise. When you believe life will always be unfair, you stop even trying to make it better. And suddenly your belief becomes your reality. But was it ever fate? Or was it simply the outcome of a mind that had already given up before the battle even began? The third sign is identifying with struggle. This is where it gets deep. If you are trapped in the victim mindset, suffering becomes part of your identity. It is no longer just something you experience, it is something you are. You cling to your past pain, your hardships, your wounds, and you wear them like a badge of honor. And sometimes you even fear letting go of that pain, because if you are no longer the person who was wronged, who are you? If your struggles are no longer the center of your story, what do you have left? This is why so many people remain stuck, not because they cannot heal, but because they are afraid of who they will be without their suffering. But here's the truth: you are more than your wounds. You are more than the things that happened to you. And if you refuse to let go, if you continue to let your past define you, then you are choosing imprisonment over freedom. The fourth sign is resisting personal responsibility. This is the hardest one to accept, because we all want to believe that we are responsible people. But responsibility is not just about owning your successes, it is about owning your failures, your choices, your mindset. When you are trapped in the victim mindset, the idea of personal responsibility feels threatening. Because if you accept responsibility, then suddenly you no longer have an excuse. Suddenly you realize that your life is in your hands. And while that is empowering, it is also terrifying. Because if your life is in your hands, then every excuse, every justification, every reason you have given yourself for why you can't change is no longer valid. The victim mindset wants you to avoid this realization at all costs. It wants you to stay comfortable in the lie that you are powerless. But the moment you take responsibility, even for the smallest thing, you begin to reclaim control. And the final sign, the most dangerous of all, is seeking validation for your suffering. This is where the victim mindset becomes truly addictive. Because in today's world, victimhood is often rewarded. People rally around those who have been wronged. It's Trinity, Bukan Puntin, and more. They offer sympathy, support, attention. And while there is nothing wrong with seeking comfort in difficult times, the victim mindset turns this into a cycle. It makes you crave validation for your struggles rather than solutions. It makes you seek out people who reinforce your beliefs rather than challenge them. It keeps you surrounded by those who will tell you, yes, life is unfair. Yes, you are a victim. Yes, there is nothing you can do. And that validation feels good in the moment. But in the long run, it keeps you stuck. Because as long as you are seeking validation for your suffering, you are not seeking ways to rise above it. So now, the real question: if you recognize these signs in yourself, what do you do? How do you break free from a mindset that has silently shaped your reality for years, maybe even your entire life? The answer is not simple, and it is not easy. But it is possible, and it begins with one thing: a decision. a decision to reject the comfort of victimhood in favor of the discomfort of personal power, a decision to stop waiting for the world to change and start changing yourself, a decision to rewrite the story you have been telling yourself about who you are and what you are capable of. Because the truth is, you are not powerless. You never were. You just forgot. And once you remember, once you truly embrace the idea that you are in control of your own mind, your own actions, your own destiny, everything changes. But the question is, are you ready to step out of the prison? Or have you become too comfortable inside it? If you have made it this far, then you are already standing at the threshold of something terrifying and liberating at the same time, the realization that the only thing keeping you trapped is you. That is not an easy truth to accept. It is far more comfortable to believe that life is unfair, that circumstances dictate your fate, that the pain of your past defines your future. Because if that is true, then none of this is your fault. And maybe it isn't. Maybe life really has been cruel. Maybe people really have wronged you. Maybe the world really is unfair. But here's the question that changes everything. What now? What do you do with that truth? Do you let it justify your suffering? Or do you use it as fuel to break free? Because whether or not you are responsible for how you got here, you are absolutely responsible for whether or not you stay here. And that is the hardest reality to accept, because it means that the power to change has been yours all along. But escaping the victim mindset is not just about deciding to think differently. It is about unlearning the patterns that have been reinforced in your mind for years, maybe even decades. Because the victim mindset is not just a thought, it is an identity. And identities do not change overnight. You have spent years telling yourself a certain story about who you are, about what is possible, about what you deserve. And if you have lived in that story for long enough, then the idea of leaving it behind feels like death. Because who are you without your suffering? Who are you without the excuses, the blame, the reasons why you can't? The answer to that question is terrifying, because it forces you to step into the unknown. But that is exactly where freedom lies. The first step to breaking free is to recognize the difference between pain and victimhood. Pain is real. Pain is valid. Pain is part of life. But victimhood is a choice. Victimhood is what happens when pain becomes your identity, when suffering becomes your comfort zone, when you start believing that your past experiences are a life sentence rather than a chapter in your story. And the way you break free is by rewriting that story, by refusing to let pain be the thing that defines you. That does not mean ignoring your past. That does not mean pretending that suffering did not shape you. But it does mean deciding that suffering will not control you. It means looking at everything you have been through and saying, this is not where my story ends. But here's where it gets difficult. The victim mindset is not just something that lives in your head. It is something that is reinforced by the people around you. Think about it. How many conversations do you have that revolve around complaining? How many relationships in your life are built on shared negativity? How often do you bond with others over mutual frustration, over shared feelings of being wronged, over the belief that life is unfair? This is why breaking free from the victim mindset is so hard, because it often means breaking free from the people who keep you trapped in it. And that is painful, because some people do not want solutions. They want validation. They do not want to change. They want to stay angry, to stay bitter, to stay in a place where things are always someone else's fault. And if you start to change, if you start to take responsibility, if you start to reject the comfort of victimhood, those people will resist. They will try to pull you back, not because they hate you, but because your growth threatens their stagnation. So ask yourself, who in your life reinforces your victim mindset? Who in your life encourages excuses rather than solutions? Who in your life benefits from you staying exactly where you are? Because if you want to break free, you have to be willing to let go, not just of thoughts, but of people. And that is one of the hardest things a person can do. But here is the truth. If you surround yourself with people who are committed to victimhood, you will never escape it. Misery loves company. But so does power. So does success. So does freedom. And the moment you start surrounding yourself with people who take ownership of their lives, people who refuse to be victims, people who challenge themselves to grow, you will start to change. Not because you are forcing it, but because your environment will no longer allow you to stay the same. But this is not just about mindset, but this is about action. Because the victim mindset is not just a way of thinking, it is a way of behaving. And if you want to escape it, you have to do things that contradict it. One of the most powerful ways to do that is to take action in the face of excuses. Think about all the times you have told yourself, I can't. I'm not ready. It's not my fault. Now, imagine if, instead of accepting those thoughts, you did the opposite. Imagine if, instead of waiting for things to change, you took action before you felt ready. Imagine if, instead of complaining about what you cannot control, you focused only on what you can control. Imagine if, instead of repeating the same old narrative about why life is unfair, you started writing a new one where you are not the victim, but the hero. Because that is what this is really about. This is about reclaiming your story. This is about refusing to let life happen to you and deciding to happen to life. But here's something most people will never tell you. Breaking free from the victim mindset is painful. It is uncomfortable. It is terrifying. Because when you let go of the identity of a victim, you also let go of the comfort of excuses. You let go of the safety of blame. You let go of the idea that someone else is responsible for fixing your life. And that means stepping into a world where you are responsible, where you are accountable, where you have to face the truth that every day, every decision, every thought is shaping your future. And that is overwhelming, because once you accept that you are in control, you also have to accept that you can no longer hide behind circumstances. You can no longer wait for things to change. You have to change yourself. So now, the final question. What would your life look like if you stopped seeing yourself as a victim? If you stopped telling yourself the same story about why things are unfair, about why you can't, about why it's not your fault? What would happen if, right now, you decided that you are in control, that your past does not define you, that your circumstances do not limit you, that your excuses are no longer valid? Would you be scared? Probably. Would you feel lost? Maybe. But would you also feel something else, something you have not felt in a long time? Power. Because the moment you stop being a victim is the moment you take your power back. And once you take it back, once you truly own it, once you realize that you are the author of your own story, nothing, and I mean nothing, can stop you. So this is the choice in front of you. Stay in the comfort of victimhood, or step into the unknown of personal power. Stay in the mindset that keeps you trapped, or break free into a life where you are responsible for your own fate. Stay in the illusion that life is happening to you, or embrace the reality that you are happening to life. The question is not whether you are capable of change. The question is whether you are willing to change. Because the door is open, the chains are unlocked. The prison was never real to begin with, but only you can decide to walk out. Are you ready?